everybody, and welcome back to the Legal Weekly Wine, where we discuss the week's hottest legal topics. Up today, we are going to be discussing appointment and pardon power. We have had a shocking pardon in the last week. This is the second week of December. And last week, we had a shocking pardon with Joe Biden pardoning his son, Hunter Biden. We are going to discuss this pardon. We're also going to discuss preemptive pardons that are being bantered back and forth in the Democratic Party and the upcoming pardons anticipated from Donald Trump for the January 6th rioters, or however we want to describe them. So I'm Virginia Tehrani. I'm the CEO of The Law Unscripted, which hosts this podcast. We also provide bar review and law review materials for the first main 8 core subjects of the law, including constitutional law, what we talk about almost every week, some criminal law, some civil law, and that sort of thing. So check us out. It is close to finals, everybody. If you want to review before you hit these topics, check us out at thelawunscripted.com. I'm also the owner and attorney for Tehrani Law, LLC, because you never need a lawyer till you do. And I am joined in that practice as well as The Law Unscripted by my colleague here today, Chelsey Rogers. Good to have you.
Glad to be here. We have a lot to talk about today.
We definitely do. And some interesting ones. We took a couple weeks off for the holidays, and we're getting back and trying to figure out how many of these we need to post based on all of the things that have happened in the law since we took a break. So we've got a lot to discuss. We're going to do this topic included with appointments today. And then we will pick up the transgender case. We will also pick up the Louisiana case regarding the 10 Commandments. We have so many issues, but today will be appointments and pardon power. That brings us to our constitutional law, Constitution and Amending Power and Process expert, Dr. John Weil. He is from Middle Tennessee State University. He's a political science professor, former professor there, now dean of the Honors College, and he's going to bring all of his education, knowledge, and experience regarding the Constitution and what's allowed to our podcast. Good to hear from you today.
Good to be here.
And I feel a little off, so everybody forgive me. I think it's the holidays rusting my speaking skills here on the podcast. But that also means I need some water. So I am actually drinking some water today. I have some wine, but I also have some water. Dr. Weil, you have Pepsi today. Okay, he's even taking a sip for us. Usually he has water, so I'm going to do this for him. Chelsey, what are you drinking?
I have like the Aldi brand Sprite right now. I'm being very boring today.
Everyone is. This is the weekly wine, everybody. But yeah, so
make it WHINE and we'll be safe.
I think we need to change our branding. We've been talking with our other investors, so to speak, our other colleagues, and one of them is very against the changing of the brand, and the rest of us are very pro changing of the brand. I think we might do like W and then the H in parentheses, INE. So anyway, watch out for brand name change and let us know what you think. Do we need to change it to wine as with the H in it? In the meantime, I am still going to drink some wine without the H in it. I've got a lovely Chardonnay today. It is Sonoma Coast 2018 La Crema. Beautiful bottle, beautiful wine. And I have to give a shout out. This was actually donated to us, given to me, and I'm bringing it into The Law Unscripted, by a very good friend of mine, Nicole Hagedorn, and her daughter, Margaret Lawson. And we had Margaret with us a couple of weeks ago on one of our podcasts. She's my goddaughter as well as our current intern. And want to say a huge thank you to them. We had some good exchanges over the holidays, and this is one of my favorites, and we're using it to us. So cheers, everybody, as we prepare for pardons and appointments. Very nice. Okay. So, shocker, or am I the only one shocked and surprised that President Biden just pardoned Hunter Biden?
Well, he said he wouldn't, so it's a surprise in that respect.
Yes.
He's not the first president to pardon a relative. Bill Clinton pardoned a half brother
yes.
For drug distribution. And he's not the first president, although it's still a little unusual, but he's not the first president to give a pardon in part for unspecified offenses during a certain time period. Gerald Ford did this when he pardoned Richard Nixon for any crimes during that period.
Where it was abroad, anything he may have done during that time.
Right.
Yeah, and Chelsey, did you see, seriously, how long this went back?
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was more surprised. I mean, I was surprised because we had talked about it on here before that he said he wasn't going to do it and he was really adamant about it.
Yeah.
But I also kind of think, I go back to my original point when we talked about pardons, that it's kind of like a fun treat. Like, you got to be president and you have a little fun treat. You get to pardon people, you know? So I don't blame him.
I'm not putting this in my next commentary on the Constitution. I'm sorry.
It was your job as president. Now you get a little treat.
Blessings on everyone.
Exactly. Like the Oprah style. You get a car. Like, I think. But I was surprised at how long it spanned and like how it seemed kind of general.
It was like, what, 2014? I think
it was
like a 10-year period.
It was like a whole decade. And it was for like anything ever, which is kind of, I mean, it seemed wild to me. Apparently it's happened before. Dr. Weil knows the history on it. But I was like, can you do this? Can you just say for anything you've ever done, no crimes ever?
Well, at least federally, right? This is only federal crimes.
And Absolutely. It can't be for a crime for which you've been impeached.
Okay.
That's the other limit. By the way, if people are interested in my fuller view,
yes,
I have an article in the Well News called "Biden's Action Renews Attention to the Pardon Power." And it was published on December the 4th.
Nice. Okay.
So that'll give a little bit more historical context for the people who want it. But you know, it's basically a power that was passed down from the king. The limitation on impeachments was also to remedy what was perceived as a potential problem with impeaching the king's ministers and then having him pardon them. So it goes pretty far back to English history, and probably has precedents. I mean, certainly there are precedents, biblical precedents, I would think, and probably some classical ones as well.
And for this, we actually memorialized it in an official article of the Constitution.
Yes.
This isn't even an amendment.
Under the president's power. And, you know, it's really hard to defend. And I think that's sort of how I start my article, that, if you say you're not going to do something and you do it. But the one defense you can give, and it's not altogether compelling, but we have a president-elect who, as much as or more than any previous president-elect, is pretty much vowing retribution against his political opponents,
right,
including people who've not been indicted for anything.
Right.
Liz Cheney, for example, Adam Schiff, people who led a congressional investigation
into the January 6th issue.
Right. Right. The special prosecutor. I mean, he's
Jack Smith,
certainly
right.
said that he's going to fire them. But the suggestion is, I mean, I think as late as yesterday, he said he thought Liz Cheney should be in prison. Now, I will say that he did join in 2016. He did join those who said lock her up in reference to Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And to my knowledge, no extra prosecution was enacted as a result of that. So it may just be rhetoric, but it's and this will go when we get to the appointment power. Part of the problem with some of the appointees is, and particularly the attorney general,
right,
is that this is a person who basically says, yes, that's what we're going to, when we get in power, we're going to enact retribution. And, that's the kind of thing you find in totalitarian nations. It's not the kind, it's anti-democratic. I mean,
yeah,
they should certainly be subject to the law if they commit a crime.
And that's where I am, especially as a former prosecutor, as a criminal defense attorney, practicing for 19 years. If they have committed crimes, legitimate crimes that are already on the books, whether
Absolutely.
They're federal, whether they're state, absolutely pursue an investigation. If the investigation finds probable cause, pursue the indictment, pursue the charges. I don't have any problem for laws and enforcing prosecutions. My issue, like Dr. Weil, that you're stating, is if it's just a let's go after them and figure it out as we go, well, then that's my concern. Now, my husband, he's much more optimistic than I, so I've got to get his thoughts in here. And he'll hate it when he listens to this later. I'm not going to give him a heads up. But he says, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We have to wait and see. And if they've committed a crime, then the justice system will work it out. And if they haven't, then the justice system will work it out. They won't be indicted. The grand jury this, the grand jury that. I'm like, yes, that's supposed to be how it works. And that's why I'm an attorney, is I believe so very strongly in the justice system. And if they go through the justice system that I believe that we have and that we've set up, then I do agree that if Liz Cheney hasn't committed an actual crime, then she will be exonerated.
There's no reason to believe she has.
Right, exactly.
I mean, she was in Congress. Congress has the right to investigate.
They set up a committee. She was on the committee.
And she has the right to criticize Donald Trump or anybody else.
That's our
First
free
Amendment
speech.
Right. Yes.
But the concern is if we're going after them because of their exercise of free speech, because of their jobs while they were in the legislature, are we coming up with new laws? Are we enforcing something we can't? Are we just locking them up without laws? And this is the unknown, right? We're hearing the rhetoric, and it's hard to know what to believe of the rhetoric. For me, it's like, well, if they say it, you have to believe them. We only know people based on what they say and then what they do. So why are we not going to believe what they're saying? And if they're saying, lock them up, we're going after you, we're getting revenge, we're getting retribution, then there is that fear of, well, what laws are we violating to do that versus making sure other people haven't violated the law?
I think my one criticism, or my primary criticism of Biden's, other than he broke his word, which is never a good thing to do, is in doing so, now he gave a rationale, and usually that's good. Right. I'm not just pardoning somebody out of caprice. I'm pardoning somebody, he basically says, because he doesn't think he got a fair trial because he was a member of his family. The problem with that is that casts a kind of aspersions on the justice system that Trump has also been casting. So
exactly.
It tends to pave the way for Trump to come in and do the same thing. And by the way, I think we're going to get to this, but the question that Trump's pardon raises is maybe you ought to do a preemptive pardon of people like Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff and others who there's no reason to believe they did anything wrong, but just to keep them from being hassled.
We want to protect
for the
them.
next 10 years.
Right. Exactly. And I don't know of any preemptive pardons that I've never seen any or don't know any, but Dr. Weil, you're the one who knows more of the history.
Nixon and Biden, they were pardons for crimes that were not specified.
Right. But where there was at least an indication that they could be charged with specific crimes.
Well, right. I frankly, if I were Liz Cheney, I think I would say, no, thank you. Don't give me a pardon. I haven't done anything wrong. I'd love to show it. I do need to ask you, though, a personal question.
Sure.
Have you ever indicted the ham sandwich?
I have not.
Okay, you know why I'm asking.
Yes, there's a claim in law, especially for prosecutions, where the grand jury would indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor asked them to, because it's seen as more of a rubber stamp, that the prosecutor is the one who goes into the grand jury, presents the evidence in front of the grand jury. There's no defense. There's no evidence put on by a defendant. The defendant isn't even allowed in the grand jury. A defense attorney isn't allowed in the grand jury. So the idea is that the prosecutor has full stage and full authority and full control over a grand jury and can make them indict anyone. Now, what I have seen, I do agree that it's most likely and almost always, if a prosecutor is asking a grand jury for an indictment, they usually get it. But I do have to say, and this is where I like the justice system and try to support the one that we have, is, in both of those cities where I prosecuted, we had multiple grand juries. The grand jury would sit once a month and all of the cases would be heard. And there were cases where there was no probable cause found. So they would find what's called a no true bill, and they would refuse the indictment. Didn't happen all the time, but every single time there was a grand jury that was sat, there were some that were put back as no true bill. So as much as everybody says you can indict a ham sandwich, I have never indicted one. And I have also seen a lot of times where the grand jury does say, you know what, that's just not enough, and have refused it. So this is where my husband's like, well, trust that system. And I want to, but Dr. Weil, you bring up a great point of if Hunter Biden is being pardoned as, well, he couldn't get a fair trial because of who he is, then honestly, and I never thought I would say this, he should pardon Trump.
Well, there has been that, and of course, looming over all of this is Trump's promise, and it's still not clear whether it applies to everyone or only certain. But basically, he is calling the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, including police officers, as political prisoners, and has indicated that he plans to pardon most, if not all of them,
on day one.
Mm-hmm. Right, on day one. So, and one of the problems with the Biden pardon is it does make it harder. And again, I'm not opposed to a case by case. Could somebody have gotten caught up in something, not realize they were doing something illegal? But to give a blanket pardon simply because they were there on your behalf is certainly denigrating to the justice system.
Chelsey, what are your thoughts here? You've been a little quiet, but I know I've been talking a lot. So let's hear them.
No. I have a lot of thoughts. First, I think I would have had a lot more. I agree with Dr. Weil. I think the fact that he went back on his word is my biggest issue with that's my biggest issue with the whole thing. Second, no, I think this was just a poor choice. I think him trying to justify giving the pardon was frankly stupid. Like, I don't believe it. I didn't believe a word he said as justification. I think it would have landed better with most people if he just said, it's my son, I love him, I have the ability to do this, and I would feel bad, if I didn't do it. I think I would have had a lot more respect for that argument, him just coming out and saying, I did it because I can, it is what it is.
It's my power. Mm-hmm.
Right. But trying to make some argument, like you said, about the unfairness of the justice system. Anyone who's listened before is not going to be shocked to hear me say, I don't necessarily trust it all the time. I have a lot of complaints. I don't think it's necessarily fair a lot of the time. Right. But I do think it's concerning for a president to really make that argument. Okay, if the system doesn't work, then what's the point?
Right.
Right. We can criticize the system. I think there's a lot of place for that. But if we're just saying people aren't getting a fair trial, the system doesn't work, how are you expecting the American people to buy into the system then? I think that is a wild thought.
And he has been, I agree, because Chelsey, what he's been saying is it's fine. And Trump is worrying over nothing. He's making people fear a system is corrupt when it's not. It's just finding out that these are truthful claims against him. But now he is opening that door of, well, maybe there is some truth in Trump's claims. Yeah. That the justice system is corrupt, whether it's the federal DOJ or regular state ones. But now he has implanted that by 2 presidents. And it is going to the appointments, Dr. Weil, is maybe we do need these appointments by Trump to clean up the justice system. Maybe it is something that's more insidious than Democrats have realized, and it's just been anti-Trump. And for me, this is hard. Personally, this is very hard because I have, as most of you know who listen to the show, I do believe in the justice system. I believe in the jury system. And I believe that if they found Trump liable in E. Jean Carroll's trial, he was liable. I believe that if they found him guilty in the New York crimes, that he was guilty. But this opens it all up where if the chief, right, president, executor in chief is saying both of them now there's some corruption based on who the political leaders are, then I think it opens it up that Democrats need to start looking and saying, well, maybe there is. But are the appointments so political that we're going to be chasing non-offenders? And this is where we go back to the Liz Cheneys and others of, so we now have blanket pardons. It wasn't questioned with Gerald Ford for President Nixon. Nobody questioned it. So there's never
no
been
constitutional basis to question it. I mean, frankly.
Who would have standing?
Right. And the only limitations are this impeachment exception, and you can only pardon a federal offense, you can't pardon a civil offense.
So technically, it seems like it's allowed what he's done.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that it's constitutional. That doesn't mean that it's wise.
Now, the preemptive pardons, if there are no exceptions, does it sound like those would be allowed as well?
I think they would. I don't necessarily. If I were one of them, I'd take my chance. One of the first books I ever reviewed is a book called "The Process is a Punishment." And if there's a flaw in the legal system, the flaw is that you can be tied up for years with lots of expenses and be exonerated, but feel like you've still lost.
Absolutely.
And so that's the problem. And it really does, it points to the how much power we really do entrust district attorneys with.
Yes.
Or prosecutors, they need to be very mindful that their decisions could have very untoward effects on individuals.
Absolutely.
Who turn out to be innocent.
Absolutely. So with this, Chelsey, I agree. I do think, and here's my other struggle with Joe Biden is, how many episodes ago that we were saying we really respect Joe Biden for his comments that he won't pardon his son.
Right.
And it is, for me, it is a disappointment, a moral and personal disappointment that he's gone back on his word. I feel betrayed that, maybe he really did have more skin in it than I thought he did. Yeah. I've been complaining about this, and my husband again was saying, well, but those are our leaders now, is we're not looking for the moral high ground anymore. Everybody's out for their own power. Why should we complain? Let them do it. If they want to lie, they get to lie. And it was hard for me to accept that is I think I'm still on the idea that our leaders should be above that somehow.
They should.
That they should be the example that we set, a good example, a good moral example. And, we've lost that looking back at Bill Clinton, the, morals went down the toilet. We've got, even with JFK, we had all of these scandals of the affairs. I know of earlier presidents, we also had issues of affairs. So I'm not expecting them to be, perfect citizens or men or women. But I think the idea of being true to your word, admitting when you're not, or admitting when you've made a mistake, having the moral high ground having integrity is what I'd love to see in our leaders, but it doesn't seem like those people can even become our leaders anymore because you have to have money. You have to have power. You have to be able to manipulate people, sell people, advertise to people. And, the moral high ground is kind of put to the side. And that's really sad for me on a personal level.
I think maybe have just been more jaded from the start.
You are terrible. A few generations, at least a generation or two behind me.
I think maybe I never really thought any of our leaders had a moral high ground within my lifetime. I don't think I ever thought that. So I guess maybe I'm not as disappointed, but sometimes it sucks when you're right. It's not a good thing. I don't like being proven right about this.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about appointments.
Let's do it. Let's move to the appointments. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, I think it makes a good transition here.
It does.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm going to relate some personal experience. So I wrote an article, and I did not give it this title. But it says, Trump is already dangerously overreaching presidential authority. Was published in the Tennessean on December the 1st. And the editor tells me that it has gotten more responses than anything in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I should say that about 90% of what I've gotten have been very negative.
You've
Most
even
resort
gotten some threats.
resort to name calling and the like, and I've tried to answer each of them respectfully, although sometimes it's a little hard to do. But there may just be the basic argument I made here is that we have a system. The president makes nominations.
Mm-hmm.
The Senate has the power to advise and consent or not consent.
Right.
And in my judgment, there's some pretty good appointments I think that Trump has made. Rubio, for example. I mean,
yes,
he's been a governor. I think he would be fine. Hedgepath is the guy from North or South Dakota, the governor there. There's several that fairly well established.
The new attorney general nomination isn't too bad.
Right. I'm sorry, the what?
The new attorney general nomination, now that we've gotten rid of Getz.
Well, she is more characterized by her loyalty to Trump than would probably be the best. But
her attorney background is much stronger.
But Matt Gaetz was, he was rejected. And I'd like to think it was because of my article in the Tennessean, but I doubt that was. I actually think it was posted a week earlier, so maybe it was. But I think there's still some very problematic appointees. One is Pete Hegseth for defense. And I think the other, and I can't decide whether he or Kash Patel as Attorney General are, in my judgment, the worst.
Well, he's defense, right? Kash Patel is defense, and not Attorney General.
The primary concern there is he seems to have had an alcohol problem. He seems to have mismanaged an agency or two dealing with veterans. And frankly, he doesn't have a lot of experience in national defense. In terms of Kash Patel, here's someone who, this is why Biden might need to pardon some other people. When you have an attorney general coming in basically saying...
It's not attorney general. Remember,
I'm sorry.
I think he's DOJ, right? Head of DOJ?
Yes.
Or FBI. Goodness, I can't remember. Somebody take a quick look so we get it right for the podcast. And apologies to everybody.
I have it as Attorney General, but I could have written it down wrong. In any event, you have someone who seems more devoted to Trump than he does to the rule of law. Let's put it that way.
Department of Defense.
Okay. DOD.
No, that's
Kash Patel.
Okay.
Or is it FBI director? Hold on. FBI director. There we go.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, everybody. We've got so many things that we're preparing for. A couple of things miss
FBI,
our minds.
my
FBI director. There we go.
Frankly, the FBI director has a term that goes 3 more years. You're appointing somebody for a position
10-year term.
I mean, and I think Trump actually fired his previous attorney general. We've talked about the appointment power generally includes the power to dismiss. Important Supreme Court cases on that. It's a little less clear if it's independent regulatory agency. The status of those is often you have to have cause other than a political cause. But, RFK, I think, is another junior. I think he's a very problematic appointee. And this doesn't necessarily mean they should be rejected outright, but somebody's going to be in charge of, Health and Human Services. It's a multi-billion-dollar agency with hundreds of thousands of employees. I don't think it hurts to do a little investigation. And I think the what appears to be the initial attempt by the Trump administration to bypass FBI checks, I just think it's insane.
Yeah.
Not because Trump's doing it, because anybody,
Well, yeah, we place such high regard on national security, and if you're going into any kind of federal field, there's always a security a background check, and you're approved for certain levels. of security. And I've had clients before who are concerned that any kind of conviction will prevent them from becoming federal officers of some kind or a higher level with higher security clearance. So the idea that you can bypass a security clearance by being nominated by the president is hard. Where should you be able to have the highest security clearance just because a president, whoever it is, has appointed you is very difficult, because the classified documents, the classified information that they receive access to, and the secrets, all of the national security, are we actually putting our country at risk because we haven't vetted them? So I agree.
Well, we had this in the first Trump administration. Michael Flynn clearly had back channels to some of America's enemies. Now, what the purpose, I don't know that he was guilty of a crime or not, but it was certainly enough that he ended up being fired. Lied to Mike Pence about what he had done. The appointee for the National Intelligence Director, Chelsey Gabbard, she has been a friend of Assad, who just got, is recognized as one of the most brutal dictators in the world, and just got deposed.
And he's now being given sanctuary in Russia.
Yes. So, these are connections that we need, at the very least, we need to know about. Maybe the connections are completely innocent. But when I see somebody praising a foreign dictator, whether it's Putin or Assad or anybody, my ears are going to perk up a little bit and say, does this person belong in that position?
Right. Do we have anything in the Constitution that requires these background checks?
No. Well, not
except
the
Senate approval. So
every president, all recent presidents have had their appointees subject to them. One thing I should say. I do believe that a president should have greater leeway in appointees to a cabinet than to the Supreme Court.
Oh,
because cabinet officers are they are carrying out or not the president's will. And he's responsible for what they do in a way that he's really not responsible for what the Supreme Court does.
And they're supposed to be more neutral as judiciary.
Right. That's right. But one of the ambiguities maybe in the Constitution, the Attorney General position is not mentioned in the Constitution. Now, he's one of the first 3 cabinet officers, but he's not specifically mentioned. And, if you have a president, for example, John F. Kennedy, who says, one of the things I'm going to do is go after organized crime, and the way I'm going to assure that is I'm going to appoint my brother Attorney General. Most people think that probably was good, but it raises all kinds of problems, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you get a call from the Attorney General, go back to the prosecutorial discretion.
Right.
To what degree is that person coming after you, not because you've done anything wrong, but simply because you're opposing the president who appointed him.
Right.
So
you're the opposition.
That's
you're the freedom of speech that's made a complaint. And that is a concern. And I think that's fundamentally my concern of who are we going after simply for exercising their freedom of speech, as well as the media. But that's for another day and another topic. Chelsey, anything you want to wrap us up on for pardons and appointments?
No, I feel like I've just it's gotten real dim, real dark in here, looking towards the future. No, I think I'm just hoping maybe a lot of them aren't confirmed. That these are the names that are being thrown out now. All I can do is cross my fingers and hope that this is not what we end up with.
It's rare for cabinet officers not to be confirmed. I believe the last one was John Tower back in, I believe, the first Bush administration.
Oh my goodness!
Dashing my hopes.
But the fact that Gates has withdrawn.
He withdrew.
Yes.
And the fact that the head of the defense is certainly being given a grilling, and apparently has promised not to drink for the next however many years he maintains his position. Perhaps if the process does nothing other than that, in his case, that might be a good thing.
Good for him.
Maybe.
So you won't be able to have him on the weekly wine unless he brings Pepsi or water.
Well, I mean, we clearly do some water and some Pepsi, so anybody is welcome because now we're just whining. All right, everybody. So that's going to wrap us up for pardons and appointments. Next up, we are going to be touching, like I said earlier, we're going to be touching the Supreme Court's review of the transgender care case. We've got the 10 Commandments case in Louisiana, followed together with a Texas case. We have, goodness, there's a point where we need to discuss the Penny case that just happened in New York. So we've got a lot going on, but we're going to leave it at just this topic for today, and we will catch you next time on the Legal Weekly Wine.